You are the last one because the others died in the order the company predicted they would. Not predicted, calculated. There's a difference, and the difference is the thing you've been carrying for 19 years in a body that was supposed to be in the ground by now, according to a spreadsheet you weren't supposed to see and couldn't stop reading once you did. But let's go back to the beginning. Because the beginning is a Tuesday in March 1987 in a town called Crestfall, West Virginia, population 4,200, which is the kind of number that feels like enough people until you start subtracting. You work at the Halloran chemical plant, have worked there since you were 22, which is the age you were when your father retired from the same plant and handed you the contact information for his shift supervisor like an inheritance that came with a lunchbox and a hard hat instead of money. 3 generations of your family have worked at Halloran. Your grandfather helped build the Eastern Wing in 1951. Your father spent 31 years in the processing division. You are not there because you chose it exactly. You are there because in Crestfall in 1982 there are 4 places to work, and Halloran is the one that offers a pension. The plant processes industrial solvents, specifically a compound called tetrachloride benzamine, which the workers call TCB because the full name takes too long to say when you're standing next to a vat of it and your supervisor is yelling at you about output quotas. TCB is used in the manufacturing of commercial cleaning agents, industrial degreasers, and a proprietary line of agricultural chemicals that Halloran sells exclusively to a consortium of Midwestern farming operations under a contract worth $40 million annually. TCB is also, as it turns out, on the Tuesday in March 1987, a pipe in the Eastern Processing Corridor ruptures. It is not a dramatic rupture. It does not explode. It does not send a visible cloud of chemical through the building. It leaks. Slowly through a hairline fracture in a joint that maintenance flagged for replacement 14 months earlier, and that was never replaced because the replacement cost was $17,000, and the quarterly budget for maintenance had already been reallocated to cover a shortfall in the Eastern Processing Division's output numbers. The leak runs for 6 hours before anyone notices. By the time the section is evacuated, 200 workers have been in the Eastern Processing Corridor during the leak. You are one of them. You were there for your full 8-hour shift. You breathed the air in that corridor for 8 hours on a Tuesday in March while TCB leaked from a pipe that should have been replaced 14 months ago. The company's response is immediate, thorough, and precisely calibrated to the problem they are actually solving, which is not the problem of 200 exposed workers, but the problem of 200 exposed workers who might eventually figure out what they were exposed to. Within 72 hours, Halloran's corporate office sends a team. They are not doctors. They are lawyers with doctors attached to them the way lawyers attach experts when the expertise is needed to produce a specific conclusion. The doctors conduct a health assessment. They take blood samples. They review the ventilation data. They produce a report that concludes the exposure levels during the leak were within acceptable safety thresholds and that no long-term health monitoring is required. The report is completed in 4 days. You don't know until much later that a thorough toxicological assessment of TCB exposure at the documented levels would require a minimum of 3 weeks. 4 days is enough time to produce a conclusion. It is not enough time to find one. You go back to work. Everyone goes back to work. The pipe is replaced. A new laminated card appears at the workstations in the Eastern Corridor. It has been updated to include an additional bullet point about emergency evacuation procedures. The first person dies in 1989. Tommy Garrett, 41 years old, liver cancer, fast. He's diagnosed in February and gone by September. Everyone goes to the funeral. Tommy had 3 kids and coached Little League and once fixed your car for free on a Saturday because he had the parts and you didn't have the money. The company sends flowers, large ones. The card says Halloran Chemical extends its deepest sympathies to the Garrett family. The second person dies in 1990, the third in 1991. By 1993, you have attended 11 funerals in 6 years, and every single one of them is a person who was in the Eastern Processing Corridor on the Tuesday in March 1987. You are not a statistician. You are not a doctor. You are a shift worker in Crestfall, West Virginia with a high school diploma and a pension you're 11 years away from collecting. But you can count, and what you're counting doesn't require a degree. You start keeping a list, not formally. A piece of paper in the back of a notebook you keep at home, never at the plant. Names, dates, diagnoses. Every person you know who was in that corridor. Every person who gets sick. Every person who dies. The list grows with a regularity that feels less like coincidence and more like a schedule. In 1994, your wife notices the notebook. She asks what it is. You tell her it's nothing. She looks at you the way she has looked at you for 16 years when you're not telling her the truth, which is a look that contains the equal parts patience and fury, and she waits. You show her the list. She sits at the kitchen table and reads it for a long time without speaking. Then she says, "You need a lawyer." The lawyer is a man named Gerald Fitch who operates out of a two-room office above a hardware store in the next town over. He is not a corporate attorney. He is not a toxic tort specialist. He handles wills and property disputes and the occasional DUI for people who can't afford the lawyers in Charleston. But he listens to you for 2 hours, and he looks at your list and he says something that changes everything. He says, "If what you're describing is accurate, there's a document somewhere that knows it." Gerald files a discovery request as part of a preliminary civil action on behalf of 6 families, the ones who will sign, the ones who trust you enough to put their names on something official. Halloran's legal team responds with the full institutional weight of a corporation that has been expecting this for 7 years. The discovery process takes 14 months. Halloran produces 40,000 pages of documents, which is a number specifically chosen to make finding anything inside them approximately as efficient as finding a specific grain of sand on a specific beach. Gerald cannot afford to review 40,000 pages. You review them together, nights and weekends, at the table in Gerald's two-room office above the hardware store, with coffee that tastes like it was brewed during the Eisenhower administration and a system you developed together for flagging anything that mentions TCB, the Eastern Corridor, the 1987 incident, or the word threshold. You find it on a Wednesday night in November 1995 at 11:40 p.m., page 31,847, an internal memorandum dated September 1974. From Halloran's chief toxicologist to the head of corporate operations. The memo describes the results of internal testing on TCB exposure at processing levels consistent with normal plant operations. The results show statistically significant correlation between TCB exposure and hepatocellular carcinoma in test subjects at exposure durations exceeding 6 hours. 6 hours. You were in that corridor for 8. The memo includes a recommendation from the chief toxicologist that TCB handling protocols be immediately upgraded and that workers in the Eastern Processing Division be provided with respiratory protection rated for carcinogenic compound exposure. The recommendation is marked in the margin with a handwritten note. The handwriting belongs, Gerald will later confirm through a forensic document examiner, to Halloran's head of corporate operations. The note says, "Cost analysis required before implementation. Revisit Q1 1975. There is no Q1 1975 follow-up document in the 40,000 pages. There is no upgraded protocol. There is no respiratory protection. There is a laminated card that says TCB requires standard chemical handling precautions." You sit in Gerald's office at 11:40 p.m. on a Wednesday in November 1995, holding page 31,847, and the only sound is the hardware store settling below you and Gerald breathing and the very specific silence of a document that has been waiting 21 years for someone to find it. Gerald files the amended complaint the following Monday. Halloran knew. Halloran concealed. Halloran continued operating without upgraded protocols for 13 years after their own toxicologist told them what TCB was doing to the people who breathed it. The memo is the case. Everything else is arithmetic. Except this is when you find out what the case actually costs. Halloran retains a litigation firm out of Washington, D.C. with 340 attorneys and a specialty in environmental and occupational health defense. They file motions, dozens of them. Each motion requires a response. Each response costs money Gerald doesn't have. The 6 families who signed become 4 when 2 of them settle individually, smaller amounts, NDAs, the strategy you've seen before even if you've never been in a courtroom. Gerald remortgages his house. You remortgage yours. Your wife does not ask you to stop. She works double shifts at the hospital and does not ask you to stop. By 1997, there are 41 names on your list. 41 people from the Eastern Processing Corridor. 41 people with the same cluster of diagnoses. 37 of them are dead. You are still alive. You don't know why exactly. Your doctor has a theory about genetic variation in enzyme pathways that process certain compounds. The science is complex, and what it amounts to is your body metabolizes TCB differently than most people's bodies do. You are alive because of a biological accident that has nothing to do with virtue or luck in any meaningful sense of the word. You are alive because of chemistry. The same chemistry that is killing everyone else just happens to move through you more slowly. Halloran's legal team discovers this during the deposition process. They depose your doctor, they obtain your medical records, and then something shifts in the way they approach the litigation, a subtle recalibration that Gerald notices before you do. They stop trying to make the case go away. They start trying to make you go away. Not physically. This is not that kind of story, or at least it is not that kind of story yet. They begin a campaign of procedural attrition specifically targeted at your credibility. They find a parking ticket from 1981 and enter it into the record. They contact former coworkers and ask questions designed to produce testimony that you were unreliable, disorganized, prone to exaggeration. They depose your wife for 6 hours about your mental state. Your wife, who has worked double shifts for 3 years to fund this case, sits in a deposition room for 6 hours and answers every question with the specific precision of a person who has been waiting a long time to be in a room where her answers matter. She does not break. She does not exaggerate. She is, by every account, the most effective witness in the entire case, and she is not even a party to it. In 1998, a federal judge rules the 1974 memo admissible. Halloran's stock drops 8% in 2 days. Their board convenes an emergency session. The litigation firm is replaced with a different litigation firm, which Gerald correctly identifies as a signal that the previous firm told them something they didn't want to hear. The settlement offer comes in January 1999. It covers all remaining plaintiffs, the 4 families still in the case, the estates of 37 deceased workers, and you. The amount is not disclosed as a condition of the agreement. What Gerald tells you privately is that it is the largest occupational exposure settlement in West Virginia history, and that it is also approximately 1/4 of what a jury verdict might have produced if the case had gone to trial. Gerald recommends you take it. He has been recommending you take it for 2 years. He says the risk of trial is real, the jury pool is complicated, Halloran employs 600 people in the county, and those people have families who vote and sit on juries. He says you have accomplished something. The memo is public record now. The case has been covered by 3 national newspapers. OSHA has opened an investigation. He says sometimes this is what winning looks like. You sign in February 1999. You are the last signature on the agreement because you are the last living plaintiff. Every other worker from the Eastern Processing Corridor who joined the case has died before the settlement closes. You sign on behalf of yourself and as a representative capacity for the others, which is a legal designation that means you are the last one and the document knows it even if it doesn't say it. By 2006, your list has 201 names on it, 200 people from the Eastern Processing Corridor. One name that is yours, still alive, still metabolizing TCB differently than everyone else, still waking up every morning in the specific way of a person who expected not to. Halloran Chemical closes the Crestfall plant in 2003. Economic restructuring, the press release says. The plant is demolished in 2007. The Eastern Processing Corridor, the pipe, the laminated card, all of it, rubble. The site is purchased by a development company and converted into a distribution warehouse that employs 40 people at $12 an hour with no pension. You go to the site sometimes. There is nothing there that looks like what happened. The warehouse is beige and functional and has a parking lot where the Eastern Corridor used to be. You stand in the parking lot occasionally and try to remember exactly where you were standing on the Tuesday in March 1987 when the pipe began to leak. You can never quite place it. The geography has been replaced so completely that the coordinates exist only in your body now, and your body stubbornly, improbably continues. The OSHA investigation produces a report in 2001 that results in updated federal guidelines for TCB handling in industrial settings. The guidelines are named after nobody. They appear in regulatory documents that nobody outside the relevant agencies reads. Somewhere in a processing plant in another state, a worker handles TCB with respiratory protection rated for a carcinogenic compound exposure because of a memo found on page 31,847 of a Discovery production at 11:40 p.m. on a Wednesday in November 1995 in a two-room office above a hardware store. That worker doesn't know your name, you don't know theirs. The connection between you is a federal regulation and a Tuesday in March and 200 people who are no longer here to know anything at all. That wraps it up for today. This story is entirely fictional, but occupational exposure cover-ups, corporate concealment of internal toxicology studies, and the systematic legal attrition of worker plaintiffs are all documented features of industrial litigation in the United States. If this one sat differently, drop a comment and tell me honestly, at page 31,847 at 11:40 p.m., would you have kept going? Because if the answer is yes, this story isn't about a plant worker in West Virginia. It's about every person who ever decided that the truth owed something to the people who can no longer demand it themselves. Subscribe if you haven't. Like if this one hit different. See you in the next one.